Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be, or if you're in my home country, good morning ish. This is Recreation Stream number 3, which I have billed as a gringo friendly version of El Asado. And with me right now is the creator of Los Asados, Klaus. Anything you'd like to share with the
Hey,
audience?
hey, what's up, man? Thank you very much for inviting me, and hey, everyone. Yeah, so I think it's great that you're coming in on your own and doing these streams. I think it's always great to have a conversation, to dialogue. I can't seem to get enough of it. So we're here to talk a couple of topics, some very important ones, and I think we might get a little bit of controversy over here, a little bit of good discussion, and hopefully it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, yeah, I hope it's a good one. The last recreation, I thought it was absolutely going to go nowhere because I was just the first couple of minutes I was just singing some Beach Boys to myself, and then Jose Miguel showed up, and then Inquisidor showed up, and then that was a stream for the ages. But yeah, it's an open discussion. Although I say it's an open discussion, but I usually have a list of topics to discuss. And in our last stream, I mentioned one of the topics that I wanted to discuss but didn't was the topic of suffering, which it's one of the things that we really don't like to hear about, but I think our inability to get face to face with the reality of suffering is why these past 2 years have been such a living hell. Um, uh, I was writing a letter to my uncle. He's in the Philippines, and I don't really know. I don't talk to him very often because I'm off of most major social media except Twitter, and he doesn't. He definitely doesn't have my Twitter. But I wrote this paragraph. Suffering is ultimately a reminder that we are not meant to remain in this fallen world. Suffering reminds us that only God can satisfy our wants. And for Christians, suffering is a way to draw close to our Lord, who hung bloodied upon the tree for love of us. And actually, as I speak this, I have a crucifix hanging right over my desk and my computer. I bought it from a Mexican who hangs out at St. Anne's in San Diego, always selling these. But anyway, um, yeah, the reason why I bring up the topic of suffering is because I think, with regard to the 2019 uh, birdemic coup that has taken over since early of 2020, one of the carrot and the stick that had been used to get everybody on board with the devil juice injection is do this or we'll make you suffer. But the thing is, for people who believe in absolute truth, um, they know that abiding by the truth is worth any sort of suffering that you can go through. I mean, even a pagan like Socrates um, felt that um, he was willing to get executed for standing by his teachings that he made to the youth of Athens, rather than just go along to get along. Um, and I think the matter of suffering drives near and dear to the heart of most uh, third world people, most people in Hispano America. And Klaus, given your work in charity in Colombia, I think you may have some things to share with regard to this topic.
So yeah, so on the issue of suffering, and now that you mentioned it, we definitely live in a post 2020 era where you're starting to have this very widening divide between people who cannot take suffering and people who have embraced. I guess you could call it the Christian pill or whatever have you. Have embraced this idea that it doesn't matter what happens to me at the end of the day because God is on my side. And I've seen that a lot more in the first world, which is something that I didn't really quite notice as much. So I guess there's something that the 2020 situation has brought in terms of positives. Now that you mentioned the issue of the third world and how differently they treat suffering and mostly gratitude in addition to suffering, is that there is a deep sense of humility in certain types of poverty, which we do have to admit, because I do definitely see people back home being way more humble and being way less bothered by material and concerns and other concerns as well. There's a very common saying back home that whenever something bad happens to you, you say, "Oh, but at least I have good health. Por lo menos tengo salud." Right? And so that's you can some of you may call it cope, but I really think of it as this idea that no matter how bad you have it, there's always something good to look forward to or something that you should be grateful for. And so suffering doesn't isn't really like this great negative that you have to get rid of as soon as possible. Suffering is a part of daily life, and suffering is something that we can learn a lot from. And even though I'm very middle class, like I'm a very privileged person. I've never really had to suffer a single day in my life. Like really, I've still had some moments of suffering, and the more I've suffered, the closer I've gotten to God. And I've kind of noticed this with myself. You know, the times where I was the most irreligious and anti-religious was the times where I was suffering the least. And it is a bit hypocritical because you know the saying, "There's no atheist in the foxhole," that type of thing, which is kind of true in a way. Not everyone is gonna fall into that, but there's definitely a case where the more you start to see things going wrong, the more you start to be humbled. Obviously, we say it's because of God. Others may call it the cosmos, whatever have you. And so this third world concept of suffering is very different from the first world concept of suffering, because I think post-war, post Second World War, suffering was seen as this kind of complete taboo, and it should never happen again for reasons that happened during the Second World War, obviously. And so, especially in the US, suffering is seen as this kind of great shame. You know, if you're not doing very well, you're supposed to feel very shitty about yourself. It's a very cutthroat sort of society type of thing. Everyone's trying to get the ladder up on everyone else. And in addition to that, if you have problems, if you have issues, there's a pill for this, there's a pill for that, a pill for depression, a pill for anxiety, a pill for your sleep, a pill if you're too hyperactive. So there's always the pill for everything in the United States, because Americans can't deal with suffering. It feels so alien to them, which is a bit odd because this wasn't always the case. I mean, if you look at the history of the frontiersmen and those who had to settle into the wildlands to make something of themselves in their communities, there was a lot of suffering. Some of the earlier colonies in the US, there was a lot of suffering, a lot of death, disease, misery, the winter. And there was an understanding that we are but nothing compared to God. Like, we are just so irrelevant and tiny and minuscule, and God could wink and we'd all be dead, and that's okay, you know what I'm saying? But I think as there's been more material wealth accumulating, again, especially in the United States, people feel way more adverse to suffering because they've got something to lose, and that thing that they've got to lose, they really don't want to lose it. So, for example, like, me, if I go broke, if I become destitute, like, yeah, it's gonna piss me off a bit, but I would say that, you know what, if this is the rest of my life, it is what it is. That's what God wants of me. And I've lived a good enough life up to this point to where I'm not really going to complain. Like, I've done everything that I've pretty much wanted to do at this stage in my life. So if I ever become destitute from here on out, I'm not going to really. And if that's my destiny, if that's what God wants for me, I'm not going to complain about it too much. But not in the U.S. In the U.S., and not just financially. Again, as I said, it could be emotionally. You could have a moment where you're kind of down for whatever reason. And no, 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 we cannot have that. We have to have SSRIs to pick you back up again, and we have to keep you always at the sort of baseline. You can never ever feel anything negative because that means there's something wrong with you. I don't know if I'm making any sense here.
Yeah, you're making perfect sense. What was I gonna say? Yeah, I think w- um, Inquisidor wants to do a future stream on the virtues, which are prudence, temperance, fortitude, justice, faith, hope, and charity. And the virtue of fortitude is moderating the passions with regard to um, difficulty, or more accurately, um, in the face of death. And so, even in a pagan point of view, or a classical pagan point of view, not this larpy modern crap, um, one of the ways of one of the ways of demonstrating this virtue of fortitude is to something that's something that's very difficult and will entail a lot of suffering and risk of death for the sake of something that you need to do. So, um, the thing is, if you luxuriate in the passions, or, as you know, the physical delights too much, eventually all this effort at avoiding suffering will cause you to suffer anyway. So you have to face it one way or another, because you are going to face it, and the more you put it off, the harder it's going to be. Like, if you use food as a drug, or as just something to make you happy, and eventually you're going to get fat, you're going to get diabetes, and most likely you're going to get cancer and die of heart failure. So there's even some purely secular benefit to facing suffering, necessary suffering. And suffering, I guess, is also a way of showing us where we need to grow as people. Um, so,
Wow.
yeah. So, what I've noticed in my professional life is that if the job gets too easy, or if I fall into a groove, that's a dangerous place to be, because when I don't embrace the ardor of looking for another job, or um, helping the business grow, or helping whatever it is, like whatever lab or company I'm working for, increase their scientific output, then that means that I'm avoiding suffering. And if I don't deal with this right now, I am going to suffer professionally. Now, uh, I just was recently, I, I recently was put in trouble at my most recent job. But but the interesting story here is that it involves suffering in two very distinct ways. So there's the suffering that you go through by refusing to grow and refusing to challenge yourself, which that's something that I was dealing with because of work from home and lockdowns and all of that. So, in a sense, you can hand me the L for just staying put and not really trying to grow my way out of it. On the other hand, the reason why I got in trouble was because I refused to take the devil juice injection. And although the company provided a means for a religious exemption, ultimately the order in and of itself is illegal, and it was dead in the water because of the Supreme Court decision, but they didn't care. But the thing was, um, this is where I get the W, in fact, because um, my job was threatening to fire me because I wouldn't take this stupid death injection, uh, and they were threatening my job over it. But I already saw something like that coming down the pike. I'd say I saw it around mid 2020, and I said, if this is going to happen, no matter no matter what anybody, my job, my friends, my family tell me, I'm not going to take it. And and perhaps this is just a sign that perhaps this is an opportunity for me to go through all of the suffering that I tried to avoid throughout my 20s. And um and actually now I have a couple of job offers down the pike, so that threat ultimately, I think it may lead to better vistas. And I'm also grateful that I actually started dating my current girlfriend as my job was ending, and they were threat. I was getting all of these threats from management, and I was trying to deal with this through lawyers and whatnot. So, yeah. Um, God, I wish Noel was here because he's really good about talking these sorts of things. And yeah, I added him on Twitter, and I'm just wondering why he's not here. Do you think you could nudge him on?
All right, I'll see if I can. He might be on another stream though. But now that you mention that, do you have you seen the picture of Jesus holding like a big teddy bear behind him, and he has a smaller teddy bear up front, and he's trying to take it. Well, he's not taking it away from the child, but the child is basically like relinquishing their smaller plush to Jesus, and he's like, oh, but I don't want to get rid of it, and so obviously, let me see if I can pull it up. Let me see.
Yeah, I've seen that picture, but what I think what it really misses is that the girl's small teddy bear in reality can be everything inclusive of her family, her job, her career, her hobbies, her boyfriend, her husband, her children, all the way all the way up including to her life. So um yeah, the thing about Christian living is that ultimately, as much as delightful as this world is, and as much as there are good things to experience, it's all going to pass away. And uh and yeah, I think I think I know the picture that you're talking about, Klaus, but certainly I'd like to see it.
Okay, sure. I'm gonna share it with you. But other than that, so I talked some time ago about some issues that I had with weed back in college, and I
Hmm.
don't want to be too specific about it because in my field, in my profession, they do get really sensitive about it. Even if you've stopped doing it, they'll just be like, "Oh, but why did you do that?" So the reason why I did it, and the reason why I became, and I would definitely say I became addicted to it, is because I was trying to mask a pain that I had, and there was some childhood trauma that I had that I didn't resolve. And what this crutch ended up doing was essentially almost ruining my career. Thankfully, I was cognizant enough to realize that I had to stop and I had to just basically call it quits for a while, just take a pause during my life. And that's actually when I went back home to Colombia for about 3 years. And so I definitely know personally the cost of evading suffering and not understanding it and not trying to wrestle with it or deal with it or make it help you grow stronger, because that thing, that suffering that I didn't manage properly, it ended up costing me about 4 years of my life. And I don't regret that. I don't regret that happening to me, because I don't ever regret things that I do. I only regret things that I didn't do, because everything that I've done up until this point, it's either been something successful or it's been a lesson. There's a very sort of cheesy saying that goes like, fail is just an acronym for first attempt in learning. And I definitely take that to heart, and I can definitely understand how suffering is not just normal, it's a good thing. Not all suffering, of course. I'm not saying, oh yeah, therefore we should oppress people or kill people or whatever. But I definitely do think that struggles in life and a deep, deep sorrow sometimes from maybe, your mother died or, something like that, that could end up being a blessing in disguise. Because let me put it to you this way. Let's say that you didn't get along with your mother very much, right? You had mommy issues. She didn't treat you well when you were a kid and all that. And next thing you know, when you're in your early to mid 20s, she ends up dying. Let's say cancer, let's say COVID, what have you. And now that she's dead, you're like, oh my god, my mom, like she's dead. I'm never gonna see her again. Like, why did I not spend more time with her? Why did I not try to fix things with her? Like, what have I done? That type of thing. So I see that as God trying to give you a lesson, a very harsh lesson, because that would be kind of like saying, like, you didn't appreciate what you had, and now you had to lose it in order to truly appreciate it, and you had to suffer that, the loss of your mother, so that you can understand what you actually had and appreciate it better. And now maybe going forward, you're going to understand the lesson. Now, again, I'm not saying this is what God does, and I'm just giving an example of how some people suffer and how it makes them, or how it could make them, a better person. Because sometimes people just don't learn the lesson, right? They keep making the same mistake over and over again, and we'd have to pray for those people because they are truly lost. Like, they're on the road to hell, right? Unfortunately. But as you said, suffering is something that can help you identify your weaknesses. In my case, I figured out that my weakness was, a bad childhood and not being able to deal with that. And now that I
Hmm.
know that what the problem was, now I can deal with it, and now I don't need this crutch anymore. And now I can move on with my life. The suffering can also be physical. Like, when something hurts, it's your body telling you, like, hey, there's something wrong over here. You might want to check it out. And it could be, you worked out too hard, you overexerted yourself, now you pulled a muscle, and now that's your body telling you, hey, don't do that again. Learn from your mistakes. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm gonna wrap this topic up soon. Um, Hold on. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna wrap this topic up soon. What was I gonna say? Another thing. This is speaking from strictly from a Christian point of view, is that suffering can really help us realize that. Well, I think I did bring this up. That yeah, I did bring this up. Suffering reminds us that only God can satisfy our wants, but also suffering is a great way of reminding us of our dependence on God for our benefit. Um, so in the epistles, St. Paul talks about how he had a thorn in his flesh, and it's not exactly clear what this malady that he was speaking of was, but he said 3 times he had asked God to remove that thorn from his flesh. And he realized ultimately that God kept that, let him keep that malady so that he would, Paul, that is, Paul, would remain humble and not be vainglorious in all the work that he was doing. And uh, yeah, rem- just a reminder of that relationship. Noel used to add in his prayers, without Jesus, we can do nothing, and that's true. Um, the other thing is that the whole book of Job is the story of a righteous man who was righteous in the eyes of God, suffering for some reason that he that Job doesn't explain, couldn't understand, and is never really truly explained. All that God said toward the end of the book is that, hey, do you know how to create the whole world? Do you know how everything works? Do you, a man, know this stuff? Can you explain the ways of me, Almighty God? Uh, and that's kind of a harsh answer, but ultimately, Job was faithful. Job was faithful, and he was repaid. He was blessed many times over what he originally lost, because uh, the suffering that was inflicted upon him was a test. It was a test to see, because Satan was claiming Job was only faithful to God because of all of these goodies that he has, but take these things away, and then certainly he will curse God. And although Job complained a lot, he didn't curse God. So, anyway, I'm going to wrap this topic up because, yeah, I think it is relevant because we Catholics, or at least traditional Catholics, are in the 3 week preparatory period before Lent, uh, and the Orthodox do something similar too. The next on my list of topics, actually, I'm not really going through them in any order, but one topic that I was hoping to go over with, because Klaus is here, is the United Arab Emirates is Islamic flavored Freemasonry. Now, I have a line of thought about why I say that is, and it's in my super secret social messaging platform, which is behind a paywall. But um, if I could just bring that up. Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. Um, okay. Yeah, the reason why I bring that up is because, oh, here's Jose Miguel. Hi, Jose.
How you
Hey,
doing?
Yeah, you just missed our topic on suffering, but I would recommend you go back and watch the beginning of the stream, because it's
That I
very,
will.
yeah.
I have a toddler that's suffering right now and wants to be with me, so I'm going to have him on my lap.
Okay, yeah,
all good.
okay, yeah. So this is probably not going to be a face doc stream,
Correct, not
because
with the
of your
kid.
little, yeah, not with a kid. Okay, so the reason why I said the United Arab Emirates is Islamic flavored Freemasonry is primarily because it's a very cosmopolitan country. And the thread that I was going over at Social Galactic was, it boggles the mind that only 11% of the Emirates population are citizens. They make it, quote unquote, work by basically depriving immigrants of rights and protections. But a society so composed is a mirage. How fitting that their ambitious terraforming projects have become utter failures. UAE is the Islamic version of a modernist Freemasonic society. Build a country that cannot support itself with a dedicated peasant class. Now, that was kind of a ambiguous uh, sentence that I wrote, but I said, what I meant was, build a country that cannot support itself with its own homegrown dedicated peasant class. So it is forced to import everything, including human capital, and reinforce globalist programming that money makes the world go round, so they will accept abuse and exploitation from foreign heathens so that they could marginally improve their home lives or prime them for the next economic opportunity in either the US or the UK. Insta-hoes have it quote unquote better, but only if you ignore the fact that being an Arab sexual toilet kills the soul through mortal sin and propagates the regime of sexual immorality in the hearts of the youth. I saw a Twitter post that sums it best. If she's been to Dubai, she's not going to make it. I had an ex who did, and although she's not really a hoe, she was very highly materialistic and inspired to the fake American dream of a 5 bedroom house and multiple Land Rovers. Klaus, your thoughts?
Oh man, I'm gonna go wild on this one. So it is very true that, and let's just start with this first, that any single woman who goes to Dubai is essentially an escort. And I actually know a couple of women. I'm not very good friends with them, but like I know them. I know them, and I know them enough that they're Instagram models, and like, and they're Colombian, and what would you know? They're like twice a year. They're in Dubai. They're near the Jumeirah Beach Residence, or JBR. That's, where all the cool tourists and expats hang out. And they're always on yachts, and these are the girls that we call bendecidas, or blessed girls, and it's supposed to be ironic. It's like, oh wow, God has blessed you with so much wealth, and you're just flaunting it on Instagram, yet you have no discernible job. You don't seem to be the owner of any company. You don't seem to know anything about crypto or the stocks. Or like, it's so weird. It's like you're on yachts twice a year in Dubai, and we have no idea how you got that wealth. God must have blessed you, so we call them bendecidas. There's even a song by Jason Jimenez about that. I'm gonna send it to you. And so everyone knows what bendecidas do. They are high class escorts, and the sexual deviance actually gets a lot worse. And I'm not, for the purposes of the terms of service, I'm just not going to mention what they do. But it's pretty grim. It's pretty grim, and it comes as a result of two things: copious amounts of wealth from these Emirati men, and it's literally at the point where they have too much money. Like, they literally do not know what to do with it. They, in a very literal sense. And also the very sexually depraved childhoods that they went through.
The
That
men, you
might
mean?
The men, yes. So this might be changing as of now, because I haven't lived in the UAE since 2013. But when I was living there, my school was segregated along gender lines, and this was a British school. This was a British curriculum, Cambridge. I did my GCSEs. Well, technically they're international GCSEs, so the IGCSEs, and it was still segregated by gender. And so when recess came, guys and girls, different parts of the school. I think starting from the 6th grade, you had the boys' class and the girls' class, and they wouldn't meet again until year 12, until their AS levels. And this isn't a British school, so just imagine in an Emirati school. It's probably not even gender segregated. It's probably an all boys school. And in addition to that, since they're so repressed, there's also this weird, very weird undercurrent of zoophilia in these countries. There's a novel that I forgot. I forgot the name of the novel, but my mom bought it, and it was about this Saudi girl, and it was about like it was kind of like a semi-feminist novel in a way. But anyways, in one of the chapters, the girl's brother is watching a zoophilia tape, and he's aroused by it. And that novel is actually based on real life. And there's a lot of that in the UAE, because these boys are so sexually like repressed that only the really weirdest things can get them off, and now they have the money to do so. So that's where the sexual deviant part comes from. Um, the cosmopolitan nature of it mostly has to do with a couple of things. One is opposition to Iran, because no matter what Gulf Arabs will tell you, they hate Iranians way more than they hate Jews. That's why so many Gulf countries have signed peace treaties and agreement treaties with Israel, because they see Iran as the bigger threat. And so, in order for these countries to sell themselves to the West, they have to be cosmopolitan. They have to be attractive tourist destinations with, I mean, in their particular specialty, it would be a lot of wealth, a lot of opulence. You have these ice rinks in the mall, and this aquarium in the mall, and dune bashing, and going to the tallest tower in the world. And it's very internet, and it's literally very international. I say more international than most U.S. cities, because most U.S. cities don't have major Russian immigrant groups anymore. There's a lot of Russians in the UAE, especially in the northern Emirates. Obviously, there's a lot of South Asians, Filipinos, a couple of Africans, a lot of Hispanics. We are a significant minority. Obviously, Arabs from non-Gulf countries make up a huge portion of the country because they can speak Arabic, so naturally they'd fit in rather well. And so you have this hodgepodge of people, and a lot of Westerners too, a ton of Australians, New Zealanders, a ton of white South Africans. I mean, that place is full of white South Africans. And what that created was a liberalizing force in the UAE. I remember when I was still living in the UAE, having sex with someone who's not your wife was technically illegal, and you could go to jail for that. Um,
Yeah, there used to be adultery laws in the United States, but nobody really enforced them.
Yeah, and so what ended up happening was that there were so many tourists breaking this law that the UAE just decided to abandon these laws. Now maybe they still apply them to Emirati citizens, but whereas before they would jail, like, it's usually the British, right? They jail British people for committing adultery. They don't do that anymore because it has to be a cosmopolitan city. So you can't do that nowadays because that is regressive. And there's been a lot of very conservative customs, traditions, and laws that the UAE has been repealing in order to appeal to the West. So, in a way, they really have sold out their principles. Because, again, when I was there, it was way more conservative. I used to live in Abu Dhabi. Now, Dubai was a bit more liberal even back then, but it still had its laws. Abu Dhabi, however, was very conservative. This was from 2009 to 2013. I started noticing some changes, but they were very small and they were very subtle and they were very slow. But obviously, so many years have passed. It's literally been 10 years, and now the country is only ever so slightly conservative. I would say it's about as conservative as Poland, a bit more because it's still not LGBT friendly. Although there's gay men, there's openly gay men in Dubai. They're just not San Francisco openly gay. You know what I'm saying? Like,
And they're
um,
most likely not going to be the Arabs.
well, they're gonna be some Lebanese. There's a lot of gay Lebanese in Dubai. Obviously, right? It's kind of ironic,
Oh,
right?
the the globo homo had been seeping north. I must say.
Yeah, and not to be offensive, but there's so many lesbian Filipinas in the UAE. Like, it's insane, bro.
You know what? Well, I was going to say that my ex-girlfriend Filipina, but I think the thing that modified her uh, potential hoiness was the fact that she was working as a nurse, so she has all these long shifts. But there were things that I noticed early into the relationship that I found were to be red flags. So, I mean, this was a relationship that was 13 months long that should only have been 3, in my opinion. But uh, I don't know. So, with these Gulf Arab states, there's definitely there's definitely a strong connection with the British Empire. And
Major.
with the when it comes to the British Empire, then of course there's the connection with the Rothschilds, and with the Rothschilds there's the connection with um, the cult of Sabbatai Zevi, and I think David Icke, yes, David Icke of all people, was drawing the connection between Sabbateanism to uh, the House of Saud. Um,
Yes.
so the I've noticed that the conspiratorially minded Muslims in the Middle East, um, I mean, the thing is, the anti anti-Judaic current in modern Islam is actually fairly recent, because in most of Islamic history, um, with the exception of some isolated conflagrations here and there, Jews and Muslims were pretty tight. They were brothers, because they weren't like those weird Christians who were crypto polytheists and worshipped a guy in Galilee who was a carpenter. Um, so I was just wondering if there's this connection between. So essentially, I think what it all boils down to is that um, the reason why there's this undercurrent of hatred for the House of Saud is because I suppose they're crypto Jews or crypto
Yes.
Sabbateans.
Yeah. So there's a couple of anti-Saudi sentiments, conspiracy theories, whatever have you. That is definitely one of them. The allegation that the House of Saud does have Semitic origins, and as a result is never really going to go against Israel. And as a matter of fact, as of now, it might never ever go against Israel, because Israel and Saudi are both allies of the U.S. So there's a triangular alliance going on over there, and that's certainly a canard that a lot of, especially Shia Muslims, throw at the House of Saud. The second one is that they're sellouts, and that's mostly a Sunni fundamentalist viewpoint, and that was something that was espoused by people like Osama bin Laden. So Osama, or was it Osama bin Laden? I'm not. I can't remember. It might have been him. It might have been ISIS. But someone in that is Sunni fundamentalist camp basically called the House of Saud sellouts for keeping American troops in Saudi Arabia. I think it might have been bin Laden, because he said that it was blasphemy, it was heresy to have non believers protecting the Muslims. He thought it should be Muslims protecting Muslims. And so these concessions given to the Americans and the British, but especially the Americans, on issues of national security and militarization led to the Saudis being called sellouts. And that's why some of these Sunni fundamentalists want to depose the House of Saud and claim the title of custodian of the two mosques for themselves. Now, the third one is an general anti Saudi sentiment with regards to Wahhabism and how it's spread through the Saudi state. And I've had some very conflicting conversations with different people. I have a Saudi friend on Twitter who says that Wahhabism doesn't even actually exist as a genuine religious movement. It's just like Saudi conservatism, and they just put a name called Wahhabism, but it's not like, say, Protestantism. Like, no, it's not that at all.
I know
Um,
that Wahhabism wasn't a thing until the British got involved in that part of the Middle East. But that's the point where your guys' knowledge. I'm just listening and learning. 'Cause I don't know too much about the more recent stuff.
yeah. So the battle for the custody of the two mosques. So this would be the third canard. It's definitely something that other fundamentalists kind of engage a lot in, and they don't want to see Saudi Wahhabis own Mecca and Medina, because there's five schools of thought in Islam, or the five madhab. Let me see which one the Saudis belong to. But basically the Saudis belong to one, and depending on your geographical a different type, and so you're gonna have it's almost like Catholic Orthodox type of thing where you have some pretty strong disagreements, although not necessarily fundamental disagreements on theology, but more about the application of law, of Islamic jurisprudence. And so you're having these extremist groups, which have been very unsuccessful, I might have to add, in trying to retain the two mosques from the Saudis. Since the Saudis, as Sefa said, have been strongly aligned with the British and the Americans, they've received a massive amount of protection. And so any attempt at taking the two mosques away from them has been completely unsuccessful. Now, as to why the Americans and the British want to be strongly allied to Saudi Arabia, there's a couple of reasons as to why. You have
Oil.
the oil is the main one, right? Oil is the stereotypical reason as to why the U.S. is aligned with Saudi Arabia, and that's certainly the theory that I subscribe to. That's the one that makes most sense to me. And then the second one is that no, it's more of a geopolitical thing to try to contain Iran. Yeah, the oil is important, but the US can make its own oil and get it from Canada or whatever. So energy is not the most important thing. It is geopolitics. It is all about controlling Iran, and especially ever since the Islamic Revolution, because ever since the Islamic Revolution, the US and Saudi have gotten a little closer together. And that's when the relationship really started to develop, and that's where they started building the bases, and that's where you got, Osama bin Laden, and he got a little pissed about that because, like, why are these infidels protecting Saudis? We should be protecting us. We're the Mujahideen. We're the fighters of Islam, not these infidels who are in Saudi. And then you have all these things coming together. I have to add, because Sefa said that the Gulf states had relations with the British. They are some of the few Arab nations and peoples that had very good relations with the British. The Syrians and the Iraqis did not have a very good relation with the British due to the partition of how these states were created. Certainly not the Iranians. They did not have a good relationship with the British. Well, the Turks are not Arabs, but they're Muslim, and they certainly do not like any European group because they think that all the European groups are going to just chop Turkey apart into several republicates. But the Gulf states never had that issue. Oh, also Egypt. Egypt hates the British for a bunch of reasons, right? But the Gulf states always had friendly relations with the British because the British used their ports and they paid their dues and everything was hunky dory, and that was never disturbed. As a matter of fact, when the UAE declared independence, it wasn't like a bloody war or anything. It was just kind of like how Canada did it. It was a bit of a peaceful transition to power. The Seven Emirates joined. They formally declared independence from the UK. The UK was fine with that, and they've been allies ever since. Because it makes sense. There's a lot of oil in that region, so why would you go against them? With the rise of Iran, it seemed pretty obvious as to who you should align yourself with. These guys, they seem more reasonable. They're not into this whole Islamic, fundamentalism thing. Yeah, they're very conservative and Muslim, but like that's within their own lands. They don't really mean to export Islam elsewhere, which Saudi Arabia kind of disproved that. But not so much the UAE or Qatar. These are just kingdoms, right? Autocracies, where the sheikh or the king reigns supreme, and he does whatever he wants in his backyard. And as long as he gives us the oil, and as long as he does not align with Iran, and he never will, because these are Arabs, they're Persians, and they're always going to fight. All is well and good. So, and you can ask Saudis, Emiratis, Qataris. They have very, very good relations with the British. The Americans, it can vary. It often depends on how anti-Muslim the Americans are feeling on any particular day, with the whole war on terror thing. But with the British, they are very, very friendly. They don't have anything negative to say about the British, diplomatically or socially. They're on very good terms.
Hmm.
And that actually, in a way, that kind of helps Iran because obviously Iran had a bad relationship with the British. They did not like how the British administered them when the whole Anglo-Iranian oil company thing happened, and they were just giving everything to the British, and then Mossadegh, and then the Iranian Revolution. So it helps Iranian propaganda to say, hey, these guys are stooges of the British and the Zionists, and it's all this. It literally is like they kind of do the whole propaganda like jam culture thing, like when Noel says jam culture, like they do something very similar to that. It's like these are all like Masonic, and it's all Jewish, and it's all the British and all this thing like that. So that's why these Gulf countries, as you said, feel so Masonic, because it really like it really is as you said, Muslim masonry, because they just they just want to keep their own little power thing going. They don't really care too much about like hard ideology like the Iranians or whatever. Like they just want to keep their little fiefdoms, right? Keep the peasants from revolting. Not keep them happy, just keep them from revolting. But they got so much money, they're happy anyways. Like so many people want to move to the UAE. My dad still works there. A lot of people want to move in there. There's a lot of money to be made. That is for sure. There's a ton of money to be made in these states, and that's how they're able to keep control. It's all about the money. They can keep control through the money, because if you're not a citizen of that country, like why would you protest that country? Like it's not your country. Like as long as they pay you to shut up, you're gonna shut up because you're there to work. As for the citizens, they keep them ideologically neutered as much as possible. Now, Saudi Arabia had an issue with that because of Osama bin Laden, and because he was kind of like the Donald Trump of Saudi Arabia in a way, because he was independently wealthy. Well, as independently as you can get within Saudi, because you still have to have some connection with the royal family. But the Bin Laden family was independently wealthy. There were construction contractors or whatever. I think they still have some headquarters in the UAE and Saudi, like the Bin Laden family. And so he had his own money, like he had fuck you money essentially, Bin Laden, and so he didn't really have to play ball with the Saudis, and so he could indoctrinate fellow Saudis and other Arabs and play by his rules, and basically say screw you to the Saudis, which is what they didn't want to happen, because they want to be the top dog. And so they how do they do it? In terms of the foreign workers, well, it's their own country anyway, so they can just kick you out whenever they want. But with the citizens, they pay them off. And as a matter of fact, I had a Middle East class last semester, and our teacher, she told us this, like, these Gulf countries, they don't operate like any other country in the world. Like, because in the US, it's, the whole consent of the governed, no taxation without representation, and blah, blah, blah. But in these Gulf countries, there is no tax. So if you're not getting taxed, then you don't need any representation. You don't need any Congress or any parliament or anything, whatever. The state, the royal family, buys your vote in a very real way. I mean, because you can't even vote. So what they say is, here, have some money, have a house, have education, have this, have that, and all you have to do is shut up, like us, and don't try to overthrow us. It's a very special relationship between the royal family and the citizenry. And that's how they keep power. The moment that money dries out, and my teacher theorized this, those guys are gone. So they have to keep the train going. They're trying to figure it out with the whole post-oil, Saudi 2030 thing. They'll see if it can work out. They might transition from oil to the information sector and make it like a technology hub. I don't know if they're going to turn into Singapore in that regard, because again, if you can't buy off your citizens, they're going to start not liking you very much, and then they're going to start noticing a lot of problems. It's like, hey, even within Saudi society, there's a lot of poor Saudis. Like, what's going on here? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, because there are some poor Saudis, not so much in the UAE, not at all in Qatar and Oman. They're kind of poor, but that's a little different. But
Yeah.
because there's so many Saudi citizens that you can't spread the money evenly, like, to all of them. So
Yeah, well, I think socialism will eventually. I don't. I'm not sure if you can even call this socialism, but socialism will eventually fail because of the lack of incentives, and also the lack of independence. And uh, we can talk about our suffering point, but we already did. So go watch the beginning of the stream, Jose. And it's been kind of difficult keeping up with all of this Middle East politics and who who hates who and where does so and so stand, because having the benefit of hindsight, we can see that the post 9/11 geopolitical shift was very, very highly psyoped, because you know now that all these conspiratorial views are becoming mainstream, and the dancing Red Sea pedestrians video that you can look up somewhere. um, we we're some of us, like, maybe I can only speak for myself, is like, so how real was Osama bin Laden? Because I mean, there's some crazy theories that say that he was actually a CIA agent all along, named Tim Osman or something like that, or that he was just an actor, blah blah blah. So I mean, uh, I I don't know. Any thoughts, Jose?
Oh, I mean, in terms of things that are known knowns, well, one, I mean, the Al Qaeda was always, funded by the United States. It was armed by the United States. It was in fact
Yeah, and
created by
ISIS too.
exactly. So that's the first step. Two, I mean, if you're talking about 9/11, so supposedly a bunch of Saudis, took down a couple buildings in New York City, and so the United States go after these Saudis by attacking Afghanistan, supposedly being that the ringleader, the Saudi ringleader, was in Afghanistan when in fact he was in the U.S. ally Pakistan the whole time. It's yeah, there's a whole lot of smoke everywhere around Al Qaeda. Like the idea that he's some American named guy. That I find that more humorous than anything. But he's as a member of the Saudi, the whole House of Saud, etc. That whole ruling class. His whole family history is tied up with the Anglo-American establishment going back more than 150 years. Um, that's the and this actually gets back to the other part too, where you talked about masonry in the Islamic world, like the UAE, etc. I mean, it's definitely there. Like I've worked with Pakistanis, etc. overseas, and I was actually kind of surprised how many of them are Masons. So it's a very common thing that's been spread throughout the Islamic world by the British, and so
Yeah, and in fact, those dudes, the Shriners, the guy who wear the fezzes and drive the little cars.
yep.
Apparently, you can only become a Shriner by first attaining the rank of Master Mason in a Blue Lodge. And, well, I got this from a Catholic source, so it's probably not objective, but once you are inducted into the Albar Shrine, that's why they call them the Shriners, you have to swear an oath upon a Quran. So there's actually an Albar shrine not too far away from where I live, and the only way I got to know about it was because I used to donate blood to the Red Cross, and they used to have their own storefront. But when the storefront changed, it changed to the the Albar Shrine, and I gave my donation there. But for some reason, I was intensely, uh, I was in, intensely creeped out by the whole experience, and I never donated blood again.
Not a bad decision.
Because I mean, like, there's this Geico commercial about being happier than Dracula working at a blood donation facility, and you know, oh, let's see. Okay, so this is from Ibn Saud. Repeated the following views about British authorities many times. The English are my friends, but I will walk with them only so far as my religion and honor will allow. He had much more positive views about the US, including finance, and in 1947, when the World Bank was suggested to him as a source of development loans instead of the US Export Import Bank, Ibn Saud reported that Saudi Arabia would do business with and be indebted to the United States instead of other countries and international agencies. Oh, well, yeah, I think with everything that's been happening in the past couple of years, we've only really scratched the surface of how international finance calls the shots on policy. And speaking of, one of the other topics that I had, because I'm kind of a skeptic with regard to the Canadian convoy, trucker, honk honk, blah blah. Um, so recently, there has been news that, well, they're naming and shaming the protesters. At first, it was just point and dox and laugh at the whole thing, but now um, the banks are freezing the accounts of people who are openly participating in the convoy, which raises the question: was a bank run the purpose of the Canadian convoy? Now, the reason I was a skeptic about the convoy was because when you have, just on a purely surface level, um, you can't really oust or harm a corrupt government just by showing up in your trucks and blaring the horns. You will piss a lot of people off. Sure, they may be soy boys, but um, uh, they the the Canadian state, as much as we Americans like to make fun of it, does have the monopoly of violence in the Canadian sphere. So one of the predictions that I had that is probably off base, but we'll see in a couple of weeks if the protests last that long, is that um, Canada relies heavily on immigration because, as a sub-replacement first world first world demographic sinkhole, there's nobody there to take the low-skilled jobs that Canadians won't do, because not it's not so much that the Canadians won't do them, it's just that Anglo Canadians and I guess even Franco Canadians are just not there to do them. So a country thus composed, just like the UAE, Klaus, would have to import a ton of foreign labor. And the end game scenario that I had is that, and I think this is why Justin Castro and all of his cronies in the government are saying these these protest these protesters are bigots and racists and homophobes, blah blah blah, is because they're going to solve this supply chain issue or this labor issue by importing as many people as they need. And if they wanted to, they can import entire villages from China and India, and then they ca- and then they'll indoctrinate these immigrants on the globo homo Canadian way of life, and then they could just say, see those guys there with the trucks that's messing up our society? They're bad guys. They're racist. They're homophobes. They're they're insert leftist insult here. Go kill them. So I don't know. So that scenario hasn't happened, but um, I think the bank run. So now, to be clear, I don't think that they're going to freeze all of the bank accounts of all of the protesters. That wouldn't be practical. What's really happening is they've put the fear of God into the protesters, and so they're triggering a bank run by people scrambling to the banking system and withdrawing all their money. Gentlemen, your thoughts?
Well, it's a stupid move if sacrificing one's entire banking system, because the thing is, the Anglo-American establishment or the Atlanticist Empire, whatever you want to call it, is built on finance. As mentioned before, the way in with the Saudi family through finance. The way in, you can just, what do you call it? Confessions of an Economic Hitman. You got plenty, plenty of stuff about the core power of the international Anglo-Saxon empire is finance. So destroying their own banks that way is foolish move. Like I see like the point of trying to prevent the shutdowns because in terms of objectives, like what are their objectives? Their goal is digital ID for everything. Like that's their fundamental goal, and they're really close to getting it. And they've got a lot more resistance than they're expecting. And if if there's pushback in Canada and it succeeds, they can get pushback elsewhere. So I can see where that came from in terms of like, all right, let's just go after the bank accounts. So that way, first they went after what was it, GoFundMe, and then the whole Give Send Go thing happened. Then they went after, and now it's the freezing of bank accounts. The problem is, okay, you get a bank run, and at least from perspective, not necessarily global homo, but from the Anglo-Saxon ruling class perspective, destroying their own banks isn't going to be doing them any favors. In terms of like, what does the global homo cabal want? They want to drastically reduce the population. So causing a bank run, causing a financial collapse. As we're going into food shortages, as we have supply chain issues all over the place, that looks like a wet dream for them. So in terms of that's what I'm seeing.
Okay. Yeah. The I can see where you're saying. It seems that everything that's been going on for the past 2 years has been converging upon a currency reset, and I think that well, the thing is with these satanically inclined people, don't always think that they're rational actors because um, like how much sense does it make to torpedo your own economy over a virus that uh YouTube terms of service, let if you know, you know, but uh the thing is, uh from a point of view of this weird technocratic um maximalizing without regard to faith and morals, it would make sense to trigger a panic that will cause death and decay. Because, like with the birdemic epidemic, if you deprive people of basic human necessities like community, touch, representation, um, travel, blah blah blah, if you deprive them of these things and hang over a carrot that says, here's your way out of this, then people will take it unquestioningly and maybe not even consider that the people dangling the carrot were the same people that were torturing them in the first place. I've likened living in our modern liberal world as living in a abusive relationship forever, because a lot of the aspects are there. There's the love bombing followed by the torture and the constant push pull hot cold game, the financial domination, the dictates on where you can go, how you're supposed to dress, who you're allowed to associate with, etc., etc. um yeah, that's all I have to say on that. I'm not sure that well, Owen Benjamin pointed out how uh there's a lot of I mean, he pointed out that one of the Give Send Go people uh organizing this whole alternate donation scheme is a guy named BJ Dichter. So he was just trying to say, look, see, this is proof that this whole thing is gay, and I suppose it is. I don't really pay much attention to the convoy stuff because With both that sort of thing and the Birdemic terror propaganda, both sorts of messaging rely heavily on tugging at your emotions. And the thing is, if you actually look behind the curtain and apply rational thought to how things are actually being done and what's going on, then the entire facade collapses. And if you're the one to point them out, then you're a granny killer. You want to make you want to create a super spreader event in the case of the branch Covidians, or in the case of the Canadian truckers, you could say, don't black pill, don't punch to the right, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, this is a boring topic, and I think I'll uh,
Since
move
when is
on.
protest right wing?
What was that?
Since when is protest right wing?
Yeah, well, you know,
That's a whole different subject.
yeah, that is a whole different subject. Bruce Charlton, although he is a raging heretic and a theosophist and a Mormon, he did have a very insightful point that the only real opposition to the left is not the right, because the right is just the left driving off the cliff at the speed limit, but the only real opposition to the left is religion. And I found that interesting. um Next topic. This should be short. How was your Valentine's Day? Anyone?
That
I
was
don't I oh sorry.
go, Klaus, go.
I don't celebrate Valentine's Day. Honestly, I didn't do anything at all. Actually, the day before I went on a space on Twitter and just did romantic karaoke, but that was just more of like a coincidence. It's like, oh well, tomorrow's Valentine's Day, so we might as well do romantic songs. But other than that, like the day of, I didn't do anything. It's just not my type of thing.
My Valentine's Day is in July on the old calendar. So, and this past Monday was the eve of, I think it was the presentation of the Lord in the temple. So, my wife and I were in church all night, all night. So that's what we did for that's what we did for this past, new calendar Valentine's Day.
Yeah, so I guess I'm the most vanilla answer here. um Girlfriend came over on Saturday because uh Valentine's Day was on a weekday, so there wouldn't be an opportunity for us to, because I, we live a bit over a 3-hour drive away, so there wouldn't have been an opportunity for us to have a date on the actual day. So we had dinner. Um, we had lunch that I served, and we had dinner at a fancy Italian restaurant. And I told her in so many words, I think the meal that I cooked for you is better than what we had at this restaurant. So it's like, oh, major flex. And then um, she stayed the night at a hotel. Yeah, I guess I wanted to point out, I should have made this a topic, but if you're really serious about um, courting someone, do it Christianly and um, keep everything pure. That's what I'm going to say. So she stayed the night in a hotel, and then I forgot what we did. I forgot what we did that morning, but we went to church together. I kind of voluntold her to the church choir. Uh, she wasn't mad about it, or at least she's not showing me she's mad. And then on Valentine's Day, surpri- I had a surprise date. I went to Santa Barbara, and I kind of ruined the surprise because I said, "Could you remind me where you work? What the name of your workplace is?" And then she said, "Are you coming over?" And so, yeah, um, it's been a very long time since I had Valentine's anxiety, or Valentine cynicism, the whole singles awareness day. I haven't, because last year I wasn't seeing anyone, but I really didn't care because people were still in lockdown brain. And the other thing was, you know, I wasn't expecting to ever date anyone ever again. So it's like, uh, and I was still expecting that the blue helmets could knock open my bust down my door and force vaccinate me or whatever. But yeah, and the year before, I did have a pretty nice Valentine's date, although it was with someone where it didn't work out. But yeah, so like I said, short topic, cross it off. Do any of you have any topics you'd like to bring up?
Any topics I'd like to bring up? Well, there was something going on in Colombia right now. There was a bunch of Antifa types that basically were rioting and trying to. Well, actually, they did manage to get inside a hotel that was hosting, I think it's called the Madrid Forum. And I think this is like a right wing version of the Sao Paulo Forum, but with some Spanish parties. I think Vox was involved. And so you're saying a very stereotypical, oh, Antifa thugs are trying to intimidate stereotypically right wing politicians and stuff like that. So that's about the most that's happened in Colombia this past week.
Okay. Uh,
I'm enjoying the fact that my life is otherwise not interesting. So it's just same old grinding.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Jose Miguel and I, well, we found, or I found this really odd video on our super secret private network. Um, the guy who posted it, um, he posted it like as some sort of dunk on black parenting, or showing that white parenting is better. But I
I know what
don't.
you're talking about. This
Yeah,
is gonna be good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, let me just. I'll just share my screen and um. Okay, share screen. Brave tab. Yeah, can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. Now I guess let me just put myself on mute first. Uh, just so.
Just as shocked to find out black kids don't talk back to their parents because we are, and we hear them talk back to theirs. So I used to have a little buddy would come over my house on the weekends, little Nate. We'd be in my room playing video games. My mother used to come in the room on us, cuss me out for no reason. We'd be in the room playing Mario Brothers. She come kick open the door like SWAT. Harris, how many times I told you to clean this motherfucking room? Cut that goddamn game off and clean this room. I come back, this motherfucking room ain't clean. I'm gonna take that Nintendo cord, wrap it around your neck, and stick it in your ass. Nigga, I ain't playing with you. This ain't no threat. This a promise. Try me, motherfucker. My white friend would turn to me offended, like, dude, what the fuck? She can't do that, man. This is your space. This is your area. She's violating your right to privacy. You should say something. You want me to go say something? I'd be so scared. I started talking to him like a slave from Roots. Like, you's gonna get me's in trouble. My mother smacked the shit out of the white boy. He turned into me. Where in the world? White kids are just as
Yeah. Were you able to hear that?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, 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 we heard that. Bro, his
Yes.
white voice is really good though. His white voice was really good.
Yeah. I don't really understand why that guy used that as a proof that whites are better than blacks. I mean, the only thing that I found objectionable was the fact that the mother was cussing, but the way that I saw it was that it's like Asian parenting, but with more cussing. So it's like, when your mom tells you to do something, you stop what you're doing and you do it. And it's like, it to me, it just shows how pampered and soft white children are because their parents don't discipline them.
No, there's an element of that. I mean, I think my comment on that was, if I remember right, it was like there's a if I look at least my experience with Hispanic parenting is you get the same lack of personal space, except when you get chewed out, it's not something arbitrary; it's something you earned.
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, there wasn't enough context, and I mean, it is a bit, so he could be just exaggerating things, but um, just the details that I was filling in my mind was that she must have told him multiple times to do his chores, and she got upset, and now she's just bringing down the house. So it's like I don't, I really don't see. Okay, maybe the foul language is the problem, but yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot of details and a lot of context that we're missing. Like, of course, you could point out why wasn't it the dad? And of course, insert black joke here, hashtag BLM. I don't know.
Yeah, it was usually the dad who did the disciplining in my house, at least.
Yeah,
And that's how it's supposed to be.
yeah. When I was a kid, my mom would get really angry and yell and yell to get me to do things, whereas my dad never even had to raise his voice.
You
So,
know, now that we're on the topic of that, because I feel like this is kind of personal to me, so I'm gonna have opinions, not facts, just opinions, and you guys could absolutely fact check me on what I'm about to say. I don't think beating kids is probably that effective, because the way I look at it from my perspective, I kind of noticed that it didn't actually work on me. What I realize is that, at least for me, again, this is for me, I only ever actually listened to my parents when, first of all, the thing they told me to do, they also did it themselves. So, the first of all, and two, whenever they would kind of encourage me to do something, because I've kind of realized that life is all about incentives, positive, negatives, rewards, repercussions. And say for example, if you make a mistake at your job, your boss isn't going to beat you up. He's going to probably give you a warning if it's your first time, or fire you if it's been multiple offenses. And then what happens after that is that, well, you're out of a job, and so now the clock is ticking, right? You can go from that to being homeless real fast, right? So there's a consequence to not doing your job. And so I wonder if we could probably do something similar with kids, but at their level. So not literally like, hey, if you don't do your homework, we're gonna throw you off the street and make you homeless. No, not like that. But maybe something along the lines of, well, if you don't do your homework, then there's no ice cream for you on Sunday anymore, and you're gonna, and so that gives them an incentive to actually do it. Or you can kind of like reverse it, although it ends up being the same. It's like, hey, if you do your homework, then you get an ice cream type of thing, because all the behaviors that my parents tried to correct in me by beating me, they never actually ended up being corrected. And I actually had to end up just learning to correct them myself. One thing that they really, really tried, and they failed, and they failed time and time again, and only I was able to teach myself this lesson. It's a very minor thing. It's losing things. I was very clumsy when I was a kid, and I would lose literally everything, especially phones. And every time I lost a phone, my parents would beat the ever loving crap out of me. Every time. The last time I lost a phone, I was old enough to where they couldn't beat me anymore. I was like 14, 15. And they're like, "Oh well, first of all, you're grounded, and second, you're not gonna get another phone until next year, and you're gonna have to do with a crappy phone. So I had a BlackBerry, I lost it, and then I was stuck with Oh no, wait, no, I lost an iPod. That's what ended up happening. So I lost an iPod Touch. Really cool. I lost it on the first day, but literally the first day. I got it, I took it to school, I lost that shit. Someone probably stole it, right? And they were super pissed off. It's like, you literally had it for one day. How could you be so stupid? Blah, 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 blah. And you're never gonna get an iPod ever again. Blah, blah, blah. And they ended up giving me another one, which was a bad idea. That was just like borderline spoiling me at that point. And so I didn't learn my lesson until it actually ended up affecting me. Um, so I had first time I came to the U.S. I had a phone. It was a Nokia, that Windows phone. I forgot what it's called, but it was a Windows phone. It was Nokia, and I ended up losing it. And it was a cheap phone though. It was like a $60 phone. I'll probably look it up later. And I ended up losing it, and that really ended up messing me up for like the first week or two of my classes because I had no way of communicating, right? And so I had to suck it up and take from my monthly allowance another $60 so I can buy the phone, take the SIM card again, blah blah. So that's when I actually stopped being way too clumsy with things. And ever since then, I've never lost a phone. So I have gotten phones stolen from me, like as I said in Cali, but I've never really had another phone lost. So, I learned my lesson through real life, not through my parents beating me up. I don't know if I'm making any sense here, guys. Like,
No, that you are. I mean, in my growing up, the only few things I get spanked from my dad from was essentially lying to his face, disrespecting my mother, and I forget the third thing. But like, it was not something that happened with any kind of frequency. Like, I'm not. I'm talking about like, yeah, I remember like after like three times of lying to my dad's face, I just stopped doing that. But yeah, in general, whenever I messed something up, lost something like that, or something else, usually it was more restitution based. So if you break your brother's bicycle, you either gotta get your hands on another bicycle for him, or get the money to get the bicycle. So it was much more restitution based for discipline.
Yeah, I never really experienced much corporal punishment, and even though my mom and her generation uh, got a taste of the belt, the thing was that it it really created a lot of resentments rather than making the correction that it was intended to. And the thing was, it wasn't her dad or her mom or her parents who did it, because the dad abandoned the family after the sixth child, and the mom was just too busy working outside to do anything. So it was the older brother. And so there was a lot of resentments created. Um, I mean, they still there still was a brotherly relationship there, but it just wasn't very fun. So I think the other thing that I think the times when um, uh, I'm not really sure what disciplines really worked, but just the se- I guess I had a good relationship with both of my parents, and I think the thing that was harsh enough for me to go through was the fact that they saw me as a good boy, and whenever I did something, like I lost an item or did something wrong, it was really the sense of um, hurting the relationship that was the punishment for me. So, I mean, they did things like ground me or take away certain things as a punishment. But yeah, uh, I don't foresee myself, if I become a parent, just going ham with la chancla or any sort of devices of punishment. But we'll see. Who knows? Yeah.
I really like what you said, Jose Miguel, and because I really do think that's a way children can actually learn and take that into their adult life. Oh, I made a mistake. Well, now I have to pay for it. Like it has to come out of my own pocket. And now basically that money that I could have used for something else, either an investment or just having fun or whatever, well now it's lost. So and like like I screwed myself over. It's not so much that it's not just that I made a mistake. It's like I actively screwed myself over, and so that would incentivize people to screw up less. Hopefully, if they're rational. And I mean, disrespecting someone, I mean, that can lead to physical violence in the real adult world. So you could definitely make a case of, yeah, you can probably beat your kid if he disrespects you, because that does happen in real life. Like if you disrespect someone, you can get beaten up for that. So I definitely do like that approach to parenting.
Okay,
Um,
introduce yourself, El Jefe.
is this Slayer, bro?
I have no idea who it is. Hello.
Careful with these some of these guys, you know.
Never know what you're gonna get.
You
I think I know who it is.
Okay.
don't know who I am. You don't know who I am.
Bro, you're the bro. Shut up, Anticucho. Every time it's you, bro. Anyways, so where was I? Yeah, cause again, the way my mom raised me, it was very not strict. Like we weren't a strict household, but like
She beat your fucking ass, bro. She beat your ass. That's what she did.
essentially like, and for the smallest things, like it just makes no sense. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I was kind of like sheltered, but not really. So it's kind of like this really weird mix, and I don't I genuinely think it didn't work
Okay.
because you know what I'm saying. So I definitely do feel like now that some of us lived through that, we can now kind of understand like, okay, what worked, what did not work, what can we apply going forward.
I was wondering,
Um,
since it relates to it, but relationship teaching kids the relationship of money. So I didn't get in trouble. I did not get in trouble for this, but growing up, I realized some point, I think it was like 8 or 9, I realized that I could. It was more profitable for me to pay my brothers to do my chores for me and use that time to work odd jobs around the neighborhood and turn a decent profit that was above minimum wage. So that was a thing that I did during my childhood, and I remember my mother finding out about it, and my dad did too. My dad was proud of me for doing that. My mom was like, wasn't sure if I was supposed to get in trouble or not, but my dad was like, "No, that's fine." But I was wondering if any of you guys did anything like that growing up.
No, I didn't really make money doing odd jobs. And actually, I'm sorry, gentlemen, but I'm gonna have to cut this. I'm gonna have to cut this stream short because I've just been getting calls. Um, I've been getting calls nonstop, and um, yeah. So let's adjourn. And I don't know when I'm going to have my next stream because this weekend is busy, and the next week is going to be busy, and the week of after that is Lent. So yeah. So thanks for coming, and whenever it happens, it'll happen. Good night.
there was this
I
great stream, man. Thanks for coming. Thanks for bringing me. Sorry.